small countries, but there are no small peoples. Thinking big and acting big are choices available to all of us. Size is not destiny. These words from Rwanda's president in May this year apply equally to the man himself. From humble beginnings, Paul Kagame has become one of Africa's most respected leaders. And as the president of one of the continent's smaller countries by land area, he knows full well the importance of being defined by one's action rather than one's size. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to this special edition of Talk Africa. Now, in a rare interactive session with CCTV special correspondent James Chau, the Rwandan president addressed the need for Africans to regain their dignity. He shared his personal motivation that fueled him to fight for his country's liberation. Let's listen in to this conversation with Paul Kagame.
President Kagame, thank you very much for your time. You were born in a very different Rwanda to the one that we know today. At the age of just 3, you escaped with your family. You all fled first to Uganda, and that was the start of decades as life as a refugee. Of course, the word refugee is a very big word, and many of us will have no experience of what it actually feels like. So if you think back then to being forced out of your home, being told that you weren't allowed to come back in, that this was a big world where everyone said no to you, what does that say about dignity? How far was it taken away from you?
Well, being a refugee means you've been deprived almost of everything. At the beginning, when my family fled for our lives to a neighboring country, Uganda, it didn't mean or even sound much to me because I was still very young. I just, you don't make much out of any situation. But as we were growing up, of course, in a refugee camp, then it starts registering that that's not where you should be. And because of the impact it has on a day-by-day basis. And it's about lack of food, it's about lack of every part of the basics. So as you keep registering the environment in which you live and making sense of it, you find everything that you needed to have and be proud of has just not come through, and therefore that deprivation of everything is really what puts you to make a judgment about your dignity being fulfilled or not at all.
You, of course, were living in a camp. You were lining up for food every day. You say that you were very young at the time, but there was a time when you turned to your father. You said to him, "What did you do wrong that we now have to live like this?" What did he say to you?
My father, that was at the age of 11, when I was turning 11, that's when I asked. And this was because of what I was already registering as a serious problem. And my father, took me into the whole background, the politics of the country, the colonial period, and how it divided the country, and how Rwandans, among themselves started developing divisions, and the colonial masters at the time really enjoying being part of it, supervising what was happening, and seeing a big section of the population flee the country, and they were so deeply involved in what caused the whole conflict. So this is what he took me through, and I think I must say I understood a bit of it, and the others I could not get the real meaning of it. And so that was very important in as far as shaping my continued search for understanding, as well as saying, but we can't be in this kind of situation forever. So somebody has to do something about it. And I think happily, that's how I also got to get involved in the search for solutions.
I look at you now, Mr. President, and I remember that when you were at school studying under a tree, that was your shelter. You had no books, you had no paper, you had no pens. Tell us, how did you write?
Oh, it was, first of all, we in refugee camps, people organized, actually fellow refugees. Those who were older organized and took the young people, those of us who were young then, to be busy with studying instead of running around the camps for forever without doing much else. And that's how, in that organization, we came to find, young people, kids collecting under trees in different places for the older ones who could help us read, write, and, look at numbers and so on and so forth. But first of all, there was little in terms of even blackboards and exercise books or other books. And therefore, sometimes, on a piece of anything, the teacher would write a number and sums to add up or subtract and so on, and we would be told to, respond. We would be given questions and we would write on our thighs. This became our exercise books.
What would you say to the refugee who could perhaps hear you now? What would you tell them about getting out of that darkness?
Well, that story and the lessons to learn from that should be told not only to refugees, but to those other leaders who preside over situations that produce refugees. I think really more to them than to the refugees themselves, but to both of sides. The leaders should do as much as possible in their own situations to make sure that these refugees are not created in the first place. I think this would be the most important thing. But where refugees already exist and where they probably will continue to exist, the message is to those who are victims of these situations that turn them into refugees to never lose hope, to keep fighting on and make sure that maybe among them, the very people who should be turning into useful citizens of their own countries or of the world, or of the world, should keep fighting, soldiering on, and maybe, who knows, they actually make it.
One of the great reversals in life will be that so many Rwandans had to escape for safe haven on the outside. Today, that's now in reverse. So many people come into your country for safety, for stability, for a chance to live. In Burundi, of course, we are seeing the worst violence now since the end of the civil war. Do you think that your life as a former refugee, in a way, provides you with a certain insight and a certain compassion to their plight? And how far would you be prepared to go to bring about the peace there and elsewhere?
My own life experience, in as far as being a refugee is bad, it has been bad. But in as far as learning lessons also from that experience, it has been incredible and excellent in teaching me and many others who lived under such conditions that this is no good for anybody. It's not good for us, those who lived these lives, but it's not good for those who haven't, and therefore they shouldn't. Therefore, the way we approach, for example, situations like those, one, when we have had refugees coming to our own country, we try as much as possible to help them, working with others who have different responsibilities to look after refugees, for example, the UNHCR and others. But more importantly, a message should be going to these countries that produce refugees and their leaders that it's not a good thing, and they need to do everything possible to prevent the outflow of people as refugees. And so lessons go to everybody who receive refugees, but also more importantly to those who produce refugees. And then to refugees themselves, it's just to try and help them knowing the kind of life, what it means. Maybe there are people who are becoming refugees for the first time or experiencing such a condition as the first time. So those of us who went through that should be able to say, well, what can we do to prevent that happening, or what can we do to actually help those who are in such a state. So I think there our background has been negative in that sense, but very positive in the lessons learned.
The violence, though, in Burundi has been triggered, on the surface at least, by their president's attempts to seek a third term in office. You, in fact, say that the root of the problem isn't the seeking of that third term, it's about delivery. What does that mean, though?
What I think it means is, if you have a situation where your talk of continuing in leadership results into violence to the extent that the country produces refugees, or internally people are being killed or killing each other, then it would have helped if leaders take another moment and say, what is it that is really behind this, that when I say I'm going to be a leader of the same people, then people have that kind of reaction to that level. You see, if it was one person complaining, or somebody intellectually talking ill of a president looking for another term and so on and so forth, people will find grounds for dismissing it. But if it is the real citizens, the real people you want to lead, turning to each other in that way and producing not only refugees but also people being killed and so on and so forth, I think the problem is something else. The problem is you want to lead people, but people don't want you to lead them. So it's not an issue of whether this is the first time or the second or third. It's the real substance of it is that whatever it is, at that moment, people are telling you, are signaling to you that they don't want you there.
On the other side, though, you talk about the will of the people, and you have said, if I'm correct, that you won't actively seek another term in office as president. But if that was the will of the people, if they said that we do want Kagame back again, would you do it?
Well, I don't think at this moment such a hypothesis is helpful in a way. I would be doing a better service by saying things will play out as they will play out. And for me, I have a couple of years to go to 2017 when my mandate should be ending. And I really have been avoiding being diverted from doing my duty to deliver to the same people.
Is it a distraction? Right.
It is a distraction, because if every day I would have to answer the question, are you going, are you not going, will you go? And in fact, I have recently advised people, I said, look, I haven't been seeking extension of my mandate. I haven't, to anybody, either to the people of Rwanda or to journalists who ask me these questions. I have not. And so the question is, why people asking me whether I'm going to go beyond that? And I'm saying, no, you're asking the wrong person, you're asking the right person. The right person is every member of this Rwandan society.
So you think they should be asking 11 million people rather than one person?
Or even advising them not to be raising this question and tell them the merit of it. It has nothing to do with me, sincerely.
Well, in part 2 of this conversation, we'll find out more of Paul Kagame's views, including his views on legitimacy, sovereignty, and China. That's coming up after this. to stay with us. Welcome back to Talk Africa. We continue our conversation now with Rwanda's President Paul Kagame, where CCTV's James Chau asked him about his views on China and the West.
I'd like to talk about China, a major player in the African region, and so well known, of course, for building clinics, bridges, motorways, stadia, but as we saw in the recent Ebola outbreak, a critical partner also in propping up very, very fragile or even non-existent health systems there. Yet at the same time, we hear the charges from countries, mainly in the West, or the traditional powers, that China actually is a neo-colonialist. You have a unique insight into what colonialism can do to dignity, to identity. You're also an African president, a major player and key actor. What do you say when you hear this?
Well, I think sometimes the argument is really misplaced or distorted. One, China or the West and others, there is a need for cooperation. That's my preference. China can cooperate with Africa or any country in Africa for the good of that country or for the good of the continent. Therefore, the responsibility is on two sides. The responsibility is on the side of China. The responsibility is on the side of these different countries or the continent. How do they come together and resolve problems? This should happen in the same way with Africa or African countries and the West or other countries that may be involved. So it's not an issue of finger pointing or blame game and say, no, I did more than you did, and you know, you are doing this for this reason, me, I'm doing it for this reason. If you go deep into that, you'll find that you have a lot to say about each side, why they are doing what they are doing. You'll find blame with every party that is playing their part. So I would wish to continue seeing Africa can partner well with China or with the West. But Africa needs to be a credible and active participant, as well as we would want our partners to, you know, do the very things that help put Africa or African countries on a steady footing in addressing their problems for the long term, not just patching up things. You know, you come and do one small thing here or there, and then you go, and then you are needed to come back again. I think Africa needs to build strong foundations, strong institutions and capacities to enable Africa be able to stand firmly on their own and in dealing with most of these problems. And if they are too big, then cooperation can be sought, collaboration can be sought to address them. So I don't think it is helpful to keep blaming one another and or colonialism or neo-colonialism. I think if you want to do that, everybody has has a share of responsibility in this. So I don't think it would be helpful to accuse China of neocolonialism when you practiced that kind of thing in the past yourself. That doesn't really help anyone. At the end of the day, where is Africa in this? Africa is just left in a situation where it is always a victim. It is a victim of the past, and it is going to be a victim in the present. No, I think we want Africa to develop, and through this global cooperation, to a situation where Africa is a partner, is a participant, and not a victim.
In the lead up to liberation in that great struggle, post-genocide, through the genocide, you've been that example of a person who chose to be active, and you just use the word pattern, which keeps staying in my mind. Do you think that China-Africa, do you think that even China-Rwanda offers the world an innovation? Does it offer a new model on how to do business, how to be partners?
There is no question about it. China's rise and strength and capacity economically and otherwise is very helpful. I've seen China partner with the countries to build infrastructure in the area of agriculture, in health, in education, and in business, in trade, in investments of different kinds. Absolutely, this is helpful. And this does not create a situation where, for me, I have to be saying, I need Western investments, I don't need China's investments, or I need China's investments, I don't need the Western investments. I don't see that arising, because one would not even be right, and I think not even wise, to think like that, because at the end of the day, if you start choosing the West versus China or others, you should be aware that actually the West is cooperating with China. So what sense does it make to say, no, for me, I'm going to choose one of these when these people are actually working together? So the most important thing is to say, I will work and I want to attract investments from China or partnerships from China or the West. But how do we want to do it? And what are we getting out of it? What is the quality of that partnership? What does it leave behind when you've done that? They talk about, say, China, they come into a country, they exploit, they do this, they mess up the environment, they don't ask questions, they don't do this. It's not, I don't think that happens with other partners anyway. If a situation is there to be exploited, if the people of any country are not looking at those things that strengthen partnerships rather than allow exploitation, it will happen from whichever place. So for me, the argument is wrong and is just arising out of rivalry and competition of these powers that have what to give, much as they take more than they give, than the real situation on the ground. So for me, as an African, as a Rwandese, I want Chinese investments, I want Rwandese partnership, but we need to be looking at what is it that we should be doing together in a win-win kind of situation, rather than giving more than you are getting. and that being the basis of this partnership. And it doesn't matter whether it is the West or China. For me, that is the way I want to see it, as the West and the Chinese on a daily basis are working together in a big way.
I want to finish off with this. You are well known for being an advocate for gender equality. You have the highest proportion of women in parliament anywhere in the world. 64% of your parliament are women. If anything, I think that's gender inequality. In your own house, you have 3 sons, Ivan, Ian, Brian, but you have 1 daughter, Ange, and you said that you would never treat her any differently to how you would treat their 3 brothers. She, of course, is well known these days for having gone to the White House for you. I was going to ask you about how one builds a strong nation, but I think a strong nation comes from a strong society, comes from a stronger family, comes from empowered individuals. What did you do for her to make her empowered, to support that process?
Gender equality is absolutely necessary and important, and starts with the family, and it goes up to the nation. I think women, girls should have equal rights as men and boys. And in fact, they should be there for each other. This is the best, this is the ideal situation. And therefore, in our case, we have tried to make sure that we equalize things. So it's with this decency and dignity and really putting value where value and trust and faith where it belongs, that if I can wish this for my family, I wish this for every Rwandan family. And I would see what happens elsewhere, what doesn't happen. That could be for debate in other place, but for me as a Rwandan and in Rwanda, this is where I can freely exercise and say what I think needs to be said and done.
And we, of course, wish you all the very best. President Kagame, thank you very much.
Thank you. All the best. Thank you.
Well, that's it for Talk Africa this week. We do hope you've gained some valuable insights. We'll be back again next week with more top news and views from the African continent. Thank you for watching, and do join us again. Goodbye.